Are you looking for a podcast where you can hear from real people regarding their real dental drama? If so, then you've come to the right place. Join hosts Bethany Petty and Dr. Rena Kuba as we dive into the solutions we've created and the mistakes we've made while managing dental drama. Let's get started.
Well, hello. Happy Monday. So I had a funny story happen not too long ago, a couple of weeks ago, and at first I was like, God. And then, of course, like everything else, we turn around and we just start laughing about it because, what else can you do?
What else can you do these days?
Yeah. And so I think we had talked about like, let's make this an episode. And then today when I came in and I'm like, hey, what's been going on? And apparently this is a topic where you're like, I don't know that we can summarize every example you have.
No.
So that, to me, that's a pretty big deal. If
it's huge.
All of your clients pretty much are dealing with this. Mm-hmm. So how do you want to?
I would say the subject of this is determining worth. Like if I could just kind of summarize all of the examples into one episode title, it would be determining worth, specifically in relation to our employees.
So where this kind of caught my eye, because I don't get as many examples as you do, but I think where this came into my view was, this is probably 2-ish weeks ago or so. And so just a little background, a very brief background. My office manager who helped me start the practice, had been with me in the practice for 11 and a half years, decided to go ahead and see what else is out there and all of that. But we were very well prepared for that. And so we really didn't feel a big hit from it. But from an office standpoint, emotionally was a different story, but from an office standpoint, we were prepared. And then we brought somebody else in to kind of take over some tasks. She was not a dental person. And then she messaged me, and she's been here for 2 months, maybe a little less, 6 weeks, 7 weeks, maybe even less than that. Anyway. Yeah. And so she had been a teacher, and then now she was like, well, I'm going to go back to teaching. I got a job offer I couldn't refuse. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, what am I going to do here? And so anyway, I reached out to a former employee that we had to let go years ago because of her life circumstances. And at the end of the day, like we tried working with her for 6 months, and things kept spiraling out of control for her in her own personal world. And I felt awful for her. But we did everything we could from let's take these tasks off of you. Let's give you a more flexible schedule. Come and go as you please. Like, to me, she was a good employee when she was there and able to focus. So in the end, when she let her dental license lapse, then I was like, well, I can't help you anymore. And so you're going to have to move on. And we had to separate. But we've stayed in touch. We've been friends since then. And so I was like, I wonder if in her mind, if knowing the office manager's gone, even though they got along great, but knowing that now there was not going to be somebody, quote, over her, and she's been gone for about 4 or 5 years from our practice. And so I'm sure she's evolved in her own way. And so I kind of said, hey, just heads up, office manager's gone. And, I still think you would be a great leader in this practice. You've been in several different offices now, and I'm sure you've learned something through all of those. Like, would you consider, if this is... And I was surprised because she replied back very quickly, and she said, yes, I might be interested in just expanding my own skill set. And I do think I'm good at what I do, but I'd love to elevate and keep growing. Great, let's meet together. So we had lunch, come back, and I'm like, okay, well, what pay range are you looking for? And she basically was asking what a hygienist made pre-pandemic. And mind you, this is an RDA who really has no official formal training in anything. She can post payments, she can answer the phone. She's very smart. But when you talk about a strategic thinker and from a strategic office standpoint, she's never been trained or exposed to that. She just knows what to do.
Yeah.
But the whole reasoning of how this is going to impact the practice on a deeper, more impactful way, she's just not been exposed to. So anyway, from her viewpoint then, she was asking, in Texas, in Dallas, where we are, a ridiculous amount of money. And, I kind of was like, okay, should I be taken aback here? Kind of going, are you trying to take advantage of me? Knowing that I'm kind of needing some help here right now, or what it is. And her words were, I know my worth. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I know my worth? Like, what are you even talking about? Like, what is your worth then? Like, what are you basing your worth on? In your own opinion, what is your worth? And that's what I mean by strategy. Like, I get it. We can't do what we do without an RDA. We can't do what we do without somebody posting payments and fighting with insurance. Like, so I get that. I get your worth in that regard. But honestly, sweetheart, like, there's companies now that I could farm that out to. There's always a different pivoting point there. So to me, to say, what's your worth? You're basically making it sound like I can't function without you. Mm-hmm. As dentists, we've had to be scrappy throughout dental school. To graduate dental school, we've put ourselves through a lot of tough things. And then taking on the hat of practice owner has come with its own bag of really smelly, what. It's rewarding sometimes, but heck, on the other hand. So to me, to say, your worth per whose
guidelines,
perspective and guidelines. And so I first was somewhat like, I think I literally went, I know my worth. And I was like, okay, is this the new tagline, buzz phrase, like, because they know that we are hungry for employees. Is this, and it's probably, I had to talk myself off the ledge, and it's probably across every industry here where every employee is going, aha, I know I'm valuable here. But you know what? To anybody in any industry, we will all figure it out. Mm-hmm. So really ask yourself, what is your worth? Right. Was my question. So after that, I just was like, oh, hell no. Like, get out of here. So funny enough, like 2 days later, I was at a seminar and talking with a colleague who also happened to be a pediatric dentist. And we were all at lunch and sharing, all these drama stories of all the drama we face in our offices as small business owners. And she said something about an employee. I said, oh no, listen to what this lady said to me. And I told her the amount that this woman was expecting per hour, and her jaw drops. And I said, yeah. And then she says to me, I know my worth. This colleague that I had just met that day at lunch stood up and pretty much like danced around the room. Like, she just kind of was just like, oh my God. And so I was like, okay. Like, she clearly like resonated with what I was saying. But then she sat down and she said, oh my God, I literally just had an assistant that, what was it? I told you this a couple of weeks ago. That was so funny.
It wasn't suctioning.
Hold on. Yeah. No. Okay, hold on. Yes. So I remember now. I guess this assistant, was not suctioning. Of course, in pediatrics, like even those of us that use IsoDry, but there's still stuff that gets around it, and like kids' wiggly tongue and whatever. So you still have to watch the airway carefully, especially when we're sedating a patient. And so this pediatric dentist said, like, she kept having to ask the assistant to suction and to clean the mirror off. And as far as I'm concerned, Bethany, like, that's kind of assisting 101. Like, that's the bare bones of dental assisting, is suck the spit and keep my mirror clean so I can see what I'm doing. Yeah. Like, as far as I know, that hasn't changed. Right. But maybe,
That's not advanced assisting.
That's bare minimum.
The first thing you learn.
Right. And so I guess she said, this colleague of mine said, she asked the assistant, by the third time she had to ask her, like, clean my mirror, she paused and she's like, I can't yell at her or, be constructive because there's a parent in the room. Like, that's the fun of pedo. We're all dealing with this kid and then the parent breathing over our neck. So I guess she like pulled the assistant out, or maybe after the patient was done something, she stopped and she said, am I going to have to ask every single time for you to rinse my mirror and dry the tooth? And the assistant said, that's extra. I was like, what do you mean that's extra? She's like, that's what she said to me. That's extra. So I'm like, so what, she just like walking in the door, she thinks she should get a paycheck just by gracing us with her presence? Like, right. We should be so grateful. And the fact that she like seated the patient and maybe took a vital, like, but suctioning and drying the mirror. We were laughing so hard. I was like, are people for real these days? And she said, and that's what, she goes, it was the verbiage you just said. She goes, that's what this girl looked at me. And because this doctor said, well, then I think you need to go ahead and go home. Like, that's not our level of what we were looking for. So why don't you go ahead and head out? And the assistant said, yeah, that's fine. I know my worth. Oh my gosh, we were dying. I know my worth. And I'm like, I know my worth. Like, where did that verb... I've never heard of that until this generation right now, post-COVID, where all of these workers are now in any industry are going, well, I don't have to put up with this. I don't have to put up with that. I should be able to get, 2 years off from maternity leave, and I should be able to get all my insurance paid for, and I should be able to get, I want to arrive at 10 a.m. and I need to leave by 1:15. But I still want all the perks and a 401k with the match, and I know my worth. And so the foolery of it, I was like, oh my God. Okay.
Yeah.
So because both of us, like, I think in our careers of being business owners, and like, we haven't heard this verbiage until now.
And for both of y'all to hear it,
I know my worth. So I came back to you and I was like, you would not believe what I just heard. And we had a good laugh over that. But anyway, you were like, no, it is gotten out of control.
Happening. Yes.
So I'll quit talking now with that background, but I'm still just going,
don't you wonder, our listeners need to chime in. If y'all are hearing this phrase, we need to hear from you guys, because for two people that don't know each other to be commiserating, sharing stories, and y'all both heard that within a couple weeks of each other, I can guarantee you that so many of our listeners are hearing that phrase being thrown around.
And maybe it's just me, though, but I've not heard that until after the pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say it is a massive problem that I couldn't even, as I was thinking about the examples that I wanted to provide, coming into this episode, it's just list after list after list. Like, every client of mine has had a quote unquote worth problem or crisis that they've encountered post-pandemic. And I will say it's post-pandemic. It's not that worth issues didn't happen pre-pandemic, but there was an environment where that didn't carry weight, right? If an employee walked in and said, I know my worth, we were like, okay, you do. And I'm not willing to pay that. So go on and go. And now there's just been this shift of power that has happened that I think has caused this worth issue to happen.
Well, and I think a lot of it too, post-pandemic, I think everybody who's like, oh, for that year, that month, or whatever it was, that we all had to be very mindful of our time at home with our families, and life is too short, and we all knew somebody who passed away from COVID, and that added to the life is too short, and what is my true purpose in life? And so we all had those conversations and thoughts. Yeah. So I'm not saying that wasn't important or that wasn't good or any of that. I guess me being just a very realistic person, starting to go, but at the end of the day, I still have to pay my bills. I've got to put food on the table. Food costs are like ridiculous now. So where these worth people are coming from, where do you think this money is going to come from then? Because at some point, for any business to survive, you've got to have money to pay the people, and you can't be spending more than you're making. So that's, to me, common sense. And so how that has bypassed this group of people, I know my worth. Okay. I just can't, I guess it's so far from the way I was raised and the way I function and think, and maybe I'm old school. So I guess I get like knowing your worth, but it's also, are you being ridiculous and you're asking for the moon and all you're going to deliver is not you showing up?
That's the problem, is so much of these worth things that arise are truly isolated. It means, I have found maybe one other friend that, corroborates my story and also affirms that I'm worth this. I haven't done the research. I haven't, looked at all of the factors that I need to look at to truly determine my worth. It's just, I feel like I am worth this. It's interesting. I had a client forward an article to me from the RDH magazine, and there was an article in there cautioning hygienists to be very careful with this whole worth conversation. And the whole point of the article is, when you get to a certain point of worth or value or cost, you have to be very careful because it can tip the scale. And a practice owner then looks at you as, how can I minimize my cost? How can I minimize her hours? How can I minimize her responsibility? How can I minimize her position altogether? And this has come up with several clients that I've talked to that are re-strategizing their office to try to do without hygienist because of this cost and this worth conversation that keeps coming up, because the hygienists themselves keep kind of raising the bar. I will also say that a factor in this is our temp agencies. Our temp agencies have had, at least in the Dallas area, they've had a major impact in the worth factor. So a hygienist in a practice that they've been working with for quite some time, depending upon the area in this market, could be anywhere from $42 to $47 an hour. That's pretty typical of a hygiene pay right now.
Right now.
Yeah. That's, again, we could talk completely different numbers pre-pandemic, but post-pandemic, right now, between $42 and $47 an hour is pretty typical, I would say, for the greater Metroplex. Now, that same hygienist can go and sign up with a temp agency, and she can get paid between $48 and $55 an hour. 48's on the low end for a temp. Now, our rational minds go, well, of course, they should get paid a little bit more at a temp agency because, number one, they don't know what they're walking into. There's a risk for them. They don't know how far they're driving. They don't know if they're going to get as many days per week as they really need to be able to pay the bills. And, hey, that's the cost of doing business. You're desperate for a hygienist, you pay a little bit more to get a temp hygienist in there. All of that logistically makes sense to us. But the hygienist who works 3 days a week in one office and wants to pick up a day a week, she starts to go, well, wait a second. I get to fill every Thursday with a temp job. I haven't walked into anything too crazy, and I get paid $55 an hour to do that. So that's now, in her mind, becoming her worth is $55
and without having to do any of the other drama. Like, do I really have to learn your charting? Do I really have to learn your paperwork? No, I'm just here for today. Mm-hmm. So it's like easier money than the lower hourly that you're getting or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yes. So same thing can be said for RDAs and front office. Temp agencies, at least in this area, have driven the dollar per hour up. Now, I get it from a temp agency standpoint. Their business is to be able to supply doctors with a temp when he or she needs one. So I understand they had to come out ahead of the market. They had to offer really aggressive hourly pay to get some of those RDA, RDHs, and front office people who left during the pandemic to come back and to be able to work. They had to entice them with something. What'd they do? They cranked up the dollar per hour. I get it. I get the business model. What we have, though, is people who are working in offices and also temping that cannot draw the distinction between the two. In their mind, it is unfair that they would, when they are at their consistent job, make $3, $4, $5, $6 less an hour when they can temp regularly and make this per hour. So what do? They kind of handcuff the doctor and go, this doesn't make any sense. I'm thinking about leaving because I can make $55 an hour at the temp agency. And then the doctor who is desperate to keep this hygienist goes, oh, well, let me figure something out. And then they come up in their dollar per hour. That's a part of how we've gotten to this situation.
And so I think part of that, like you're saying, and we've alluded to this in so many other episodes, it's like, do you have a good compensation package? Because how much of it needs to be that it's a consistent pay, and you're not guaranteed that with a temp agency, but maybe right now you are. I don't know. There's so much need right now. So to me, though, is that sustainable? I don't know. I don't know when this is going to taper off. Like, kind of in Dallas, the housing market 2 months ago was different than what it is now. Like 2 months ago, if we were looking for a house, we would have had to, people were outbidding and sellers were getting more than what they were asking for. But that was like 5 weeks ago, but now it's slowed down. And so it's an ever evolving situation. And that's what I keep telling myself, like, if I hang in there long enough, but there's So then it's, do we go back to a different system? What else do I need to change so that I'm not handcuffed? This is a lot of the drama we faced back in March and February in my office. And it hurt my feelings. It was ludicrous to me that some of my hygienists were trying to handcuff me like that. And then I had to separate myself from taking it personal, which was very difficult to do. I'm a feeler, I'm emotional, but
Right.
I think for me at that point it was, this is what everybody else is making. I'm like, I know, but you also make this. You're coming into an ethical office. You're coming into a clean office. You're not like in Texas, not everybody, wanted to follow the mask mandates. And, like we went above and beyond. So we put you in a safe environment. You're not guaranteed that when you go temp. And what dollar amount are you putting on that? Of course, there's inflation. You got to put food on the table. So I get it. And I do get what where these people are coming from. It's like, yes, you are absolutely right. It's a worker's market right now. And supply and demand. And so, yes, you're going to ask for more because you can. That's human nature. I'm not faulting that. But part of me says, but again, like you said, like think about where you're about to phase yourself out because my dear, who's wanting a ridiculous amount of money because that's what she can ask for right now, I know my worth. Do you?
And she's going to be the first one on the chopping block if she doesn't earn her keep.
Yes.
And
there's no way she can earn her keep. And that's what I told her, because where she is right now, after she left our office, when her dental license lapsed, and then she temped for a while, she was out of dental for a while. She's come back in because she's so good. It's what she knows. It's, and she's in a practice right now where that doc is so grateful for her help. So there's no pressure on her.
Right.
And she knows in my office, there's pressure on you to perform. You've got to do all of this. And that's what she doesn't like, is that office is not as organized. And it's a relatively newer office, couple of years that it's been there. And she said, why would I come into an office that's so much more intense for not that much more?
Right.
And I said, but that's what adds to the intensity. That's the whole intensity is here, that I have always paid my staff very well. And then I get thinking and hoping that that's what's going to make them go, I really want to keep my job here. And then to not get the performance I'm expecting out of what I'm paying for, that is exactly where the tension comes from.
It is
so that's
tense.
where, to me, that's the concern here, is that a lot of these workers that, yes, right now the ball is in your court, and we can't blame you. Like we would all do the same. Like if we were in the same position to go, how can I earn more with not doing that much more? But at the same time, I think what they're missing in that worth piece, like you said, the whole research and the full picture, if we all see what's going on with insurance. Okay, so fine, you want $70 an hour, hygienists. And apparently hygienists are asking for this, $70 an hour. I had somebody the other night tell me they got asked $90 an hour. And I said, you are joking.
It's insane.
And he's like, no, that's what this hygienist asked. And I thought, how dare she, or he, I think in this case it was a she, but in any case, I was like, part of me says, okay, well, ask what you can. And if you don't get it, the other part of me says, you are a jerk for trying to take advantage of the situation, because you're going to come in and, I don't know, do 1 or 2 cleanings in an hour. Yeah. Get paid your $90, but what are we getting paid from insurance?
Insurance, which is less now.
Yeah,
than it was
$50 for the cleaning.
Yep.
$30 for the exam. Oh wait, the parent didn't want the fluoride, or the patient didn't want the fluoride, so we got paid $80 for that. Now you want $90?
Yeah.
So I think just they're not thinking, and they're definitely working in the moment. And part of me says, go for it. Right. Like ride that gravy train while you can. But the other part of me says, at what point are you going to ruin it for your own profession, where we have all then pivoted and figured out how to get along with fewer assistants? Maybe I'm going to, if I was a general dental office, maybe I am going to invest in the CAD CAM and all of the technology so that I don't need an assistant there very much. Maybe I'm already an Isolite office, so I'm going to keep going with that, and I don't really need, we're going to figure out how to get around needing you.
We have to at this point. And I would say that's the sad truth in all of this, is we've got, the demand is up. And I would say there are plenty of clients of mine, including you, that have had employees that really haven't taken advantage of the situation, meaning they haven't tried to gut you. They're wanting more, and they're happy when they receive more, but are they coming to you with a, either raise me or I'm out of here? No, we've had plenty of people on your team, in all of my clients' teams that have been patient with growing their income. And I'm so thankful for those people.
Me too.
But there are, in every office of mine, I have had somebody that has turned up the heat and tried to get more out of the practice owner. And it's so pervasive right now that I think we've got to be able to steady ourselves and strategize. First of all, I think we do have to ask, are we in line on worth? So how do we determine worth in our particular area? First of all, you do have to take a look at what the temp agencies are charging, because whether or not you like what they are charging, you have to know it, because that's the people.
What they're paying.
What
Is
they're
that what
paying.
you mean?
Yeah,
what they're paying the assistant or the RDH or the front desk.
Yeah,
okay.
what they're paying, charging the dentist, paying the assistant. Because somebody who's without a job that may be looking for a job is likely temping somewhere, and they are going to come in with a dollar mindset from that temp agency. I am not suggesting that that's what you need to pay. The temp agency has elevated those fees to attract them to the temp agency. So I'm not saying that's what you need to pay, but you do need to know that what they're making, because what they're going to ask you for is going to be very similar to that temp agency. And you've got to be able to have an answer and a reason why you're coming in under that. Well, why are you coming in under that? Is that just because you feel like this position should make this dollar amount per hour? I mean, they've always made that. Shouldn't that be good enough anymore? No, it sure the heck isn't good enough anymore. You cannot go off of historical trends. Those are gone. The new historical trends started in 2020. Every pay trend pre-2020 is gone. If you're still clinging to those, move on. It is a good dream that has ended. We are in the new nightmare of increased wages, and we have to deal with that.
And it's not just our industry. That's what we got to remind ourselves too.
Yeah, it is across every industry. So I would say check with the temp agencies first to see what they're paying, asking the dentist to pay the hourly amount. So we need to know what they're paying. Then we need to check with colleagues in our area. Or like for us, I've been able to tell you, like, this is what I'm seeing across all of my clients. So thankfully I have a good bulk of people in the DFW Metroplex, and I can go, I know what the averages are. I know what somebody's making in McKinney. I know what somebody's making in Frisco. I know what somebody's making in Irving. I can tell you kind of the similar trends. Find somebody who knows. That may be your CPA who's very familiar in the area. That may be a friend who associates at multiple different offices and can get that information. But we do need to know what people are actually making out there. Now, I would say, again, pre-2020, that was pretty in line. Like, RDAs made kind of between this dollar amount and this dollar amount. Hygienists made pretty typically between. There's more outliers now than there used to be. So you can't just check with one buddy and they're like, oh, well, I pay my hygienist $50 an hour. And you're like, well, crap, I'm at 42. I'm desperately low. No, you only talk to one friend. They could be the outlier. So you need to get multiple reference points to know what's actually being paid. Do not depend on what your staff is saying. Your staff has researched it in a one-sided way. They could have talked to their friend who works in New York City and asked them what they pay per hour, and that's what they're going off. Well, my hygienist friend, she makes $55 an hour, so well, yeah, she lives in New York. They make a little bit more in New York. So don't go off of what your staff is saying the norm is. Like, you actually have to determine what the norm is by talking to people in your area. And I think a lot of people don't do that research because it's hard. It takes a lot of effort. But you need to know whether you're under or whether most people aren't over. You need to know whether you're under. And if so, then we've got to kind of factor that into the equation. But the temp agencies really, to me, set the ceiling of what we have to. So we want to find the bottom and we want to find the top. And then we're able to kind of fall somewhere in the middle.
Based on our budget and our needs and how valuable that employee is. And, looking at it, we've always done this, but looking at every single employee with a critical eye going, really, what is your worth to me here? Because, and you and I had that conversation not too long ago where I said, maybe I'm fooling myself and just being ridiculous here, but if I lost my whole front desk, how bad would that be? I mean, it certainly wouldn't be good, but if I had an outgoing message that said, we are now automated, please leave a message and whatever, and then I hire a admin person that's not dental I don't know. I hadn't thought that far into it, but could I get rid of the majority of my front desk, pay a couple of extra services to come in and do the AR for me and whatever. Hygienist, at least in pedo, no, I could be just fine without the hygienist, and that may be the smarter move.
And I think you have to think that way.
Yes.
To me, that's a really, sometimes we don't want to let our mind go that direction because it's suffocating. We're like, oh, I can't even imagine that type of change to my practice. But sometimes we have to play the what's the worst case scenario game to truly determine worth. How valuable is that aspect of my practice? I've got a client that had an assistant that wasn't performing the way she needed to perform, and she tried hiring. She was looking all the time. She could never find anybody to even apply. She never even got an application. And so she's like, well, I just have to hang on to her. And then she asked the same question. She was like, but do I? Can I get rid of this assistant and pare down my schedule and just run my schedule differently? And let's play out, what type of schedule would I run? What kind of production would I lose from that? Could I continue to pay my bills if I pared down my schedule in that way? And if she goes through that whole scenario and then says, okay, I could do this. The practice could take that hit. I could still pay all my bills. My income wouldn't have to change. That's what I'm going to do. Or she might come to the end of that scenario and go, I can't do that. I can't lose that amount of production on my schedule, and I would then have trouble paying all my other bills. I would have to lose my pay. Okay, well, you know what? You just determined worth for that employee, right?
And that's so kind of what you were saying, imagine worst case scenario. I mean, that's exactly what I was facing back in March. It was my 3 hygienists, one who'd been with me 3 years, one who'd been with me 6, and one who'd been with me 7. By the way, I've only had my practice for 11 years. So these people, pretty much, 2 of them, pretty much right as I started incorporating a hygienist into the practice. So they've been with me a long time. So then I had to put the emotional side down, and then I had to really come in there and play ball. Okay, this is the game you guys want to play. And so, again, there was a lot of emotional, really hurt my feelings. But I think they were going, wait a minute, and exactly what you said, my friend here. And one hygienist who's really smart, but then she hit us with the comment well, my friend makes this or does this. And I kind of asked where does she live? She wasn't even talking about another dental hygienist. She was talking about somebody in the IT field. Well, yes, they make 6 figures. So I was like, have you gone insane? You're basing your worth off of
a different
industry. So, but she's very smart, but she was getting caught up in all of the chatter. And so at the end, it all worked out and it sorted out. But I was faced with, okay, if I don't meet their demands, then I'm out of my hygiene team. So what does that look like? Can I afford to take that hit? Can I pare down the schedule? Can I? And so now I'm constantly in that mode of, or we've talked about divorcing it from insurance. And it's okay, so if I did drop this insurance and I did lose this subset of patients and so funny enough, it's the one that hit me with, I know my worth. I'm you don't even know how to strategize any of this. All you know is the more patients on the schedule, the more production we make. Not necessarily.
Right.
Not necessarily. Not when the hygiene team is asking for $90 an hour and insurance paying me $40. No, this is stupid. Yeah. She has no idea how to strategically think about a schedule and strategically weigh out these decisions. She's never been taught that or been put in that situation.
Or had to think about that.
Right. And so the doc she's helping now again is one who is not there yet. He's just trying to go, oh gosh, a busy day. And I'm your day is not busy, my friend. You're taking every insurance under the sun and you're probably breaking even given what you're paying for your patients. And anyway, so all of that to say, I know my worth. It's do you?
Right.
And so I think that's where we need to come in and go, what is really her worth?
Yeah. We have to determine that. As the practice owners, we have to be able to have a strategy for determining worth. And it can't be, some of it has to be feely, right? okay, my sweet little Sally, who's been with me for the past 12 years, who I can't live without, is being pursued. This happened in a client's office this week. His office manager is being pursued by a corporate. They keep calling her. You come and work for us. You make this much more per hour. It's a bigger city. She's in a small city. It would make no sense for the doctor to meet that dollar amount because it's a very small city compared to the one she's getting offered in. And it's like, okay, that's her worth in that city, but it also costs her more to live in that city. And there's a commute in that city. She lives 5 minutes from the office here, and it's small town. And so there's just no way he can compete on that level. But in her mind, that's her worth because that's what she's being offered. So these employees are being pursued by dollar amounts per hour. We have to be the one that very smartly plays out the worst case scenario and goes, let me imagine if they did leave, what would I do? And what would be the impact to my practice? We have to know where we sit from an overhead standpoint. We could just dish out all the money in the world if we didn't have to worry about overhead. But at the end of the day, the practice owner, you have to eat and you have to feed your family as well. And you also have to sustain a business for the long haul, which means money is going into a savings account. Money is being set aside for taxes. Money is going into paying off practice debt. Unfortunately, staff members often look at, oh, wow, we produced $100,000 this month. Well, I know my monthly pay is $5,000. Gosh, that dentist is just making off. They have no clue about all of the additional expenses that go on behind the scenes. And so I think we've got to be careful to go, what's within my range? Do I have room to bump my salary up and therefore bump my overhead up? Do I have room in the budget for that? And some people may look at their budget and go, yeah, I actually do have room for that. So you know what? I'm going to be putting a little bit less in savings, but I'm going to bump these people's pay because I know I can keep them. And yeah, it's going to cost me savings, but it's going to keep my employee and keep my practice performing at the level that it's performing at. Or I don't have any money for that. I'm literally maxed out. I have no room to go up. Okay, well then you know what you're working with, and that means no increases. So now, how can you adjust your practice, or how can you retain your employees in other ways that doesn't involve this constant hike up the dollar amount?
And I think I'm hoping and thinking that we've come a ways from, where we started talking about this topic a year ago, for some of those doctors that, like you said, are still stuck in the old time and kind of going, well, she's not, because it is for us going, what is your worth then? Like you won't even dry the tooth. How hard is it? That's your whole job. But then for us too, to be very aware of what all they do bring to our practice, and having to have that thought of like, well, anybody could do that. Could they?
Right.
Could they do it as well as that person does it? And the answer to that may be, oh, heck no. Or the answer could be like, oh, hell yeah, you are way overpaid, honey, and work through that. So I think it's just really taking a moment to strategize and kind of, like you said, set some parameters and boundaries, because, I think on the dental side, from the assistant or the employee side, they're like, well, I'm worth so much more. And from the doctor's side, we're always going to be like, you're not worth that. You're not worth that. I'm the one who has the degree. I'm the one who took out the loan. It's my name on the door. Yeah. You're not worth that. And so we are going to have to come to saying, maybe you are worth that, because can I keep my practice going without you in it? And so that for me is where I went, okay, like, yes. Okay. Now the hygienists are coming at me. Yes, I can absolutely function without hygienists. I don't like it because I don't mind scaling sometimes. I don't want to be stuck in there knee deep in tartar on a braces kit and all of that. I can do it. I don't really want to. But I could.
Yeah. I
could automate a ton of front desk stuff and maybe have one front desk person. Great. Who can I not live without? In pedo, I can't live without an RDA. Like, I've got to have a good RDA who has a good understanding of dentistry and getting the kid through it, and good bedside manner, and dealing with these ridiculous parents that we deal with. So that's the person. And so that's what we talked about. That's what we did back 3 months ago, where I think it was a colleague of mine that the employee was poached. Like, she went to Amazon. She was a degreed person working in his office, but she could get what Amazon was giving. And so off she went. And he's like, that's my second one that I've lost. And it made me stop and go, oh gosh, who here could leave and go work for Amazon? Well, the part of that question is, well, what does Amazon require? If it's a college degree, then yeah, half my office, I'm safe. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But on the other hand, then you and I had this conversation. We went through every single employee, each employee at a time, and went, okay, if we lost this person, what does that mean? Could we sustain our schedule? Would we have to, like, what kind of shuffling and juggling and manipulating do we need to do to still make sure that we are surviving as a business? And it came down to one assistant in particular, and I was like, in pre-pandemic world, there's no way in her entire career she would make this amount. But right now, she's my favorite person on the team, and she's also the most valuable. The worth is definitely there. In terms of, I'm a pedo office, we do oral sedation, I need somebody who can take x-rays, I need somebody who can polish, I need somebody who can do sealants, I need all of that, and so she can deliver all of that.
The hit to not having her on the team would have been substantial to your practice.
So to me, I gave her a very sizable raise because it made sense. She was worth that. But the whole other slew of them that are coming in, I know what I'm worth. I beg to differ. I'm going to ask you to look at that from another set of peepers.
Yeah. And to have a mindset already established on how you're addressing that. You can't sit back and just hope that this doesn't hit your desk. It's going, if it hasn't already, it will hit your desk at some point. Some employee of yours walking in going, I know my worth and I want to be paid this amount. You need to have your homework done. And be prepared for that, because it's going to happen, and you've got to put some legwork in to be ready. You've got to have thought worst case scenario. You've got to talk to your CPA, figure out what kind of room you have in the budget. And if you hear from the CPA that you have room in the budget, get out in front of it. Don't wait for that person to show up at your desk, because then they're in control and you're in handcuffs. Get out in front of it if there's room in the budget, and give raises, give incentives, do what you need to do to make it equitable for them and for you. If you don't have room in the budget, then you still need to be having open and honest conversations with your employees about pay on a regular basis. And they need to know your goals and how they can increase their pay over time. And they've got to understand, if the practice is succeeding, that you are going to be sharing that with them. So we can't just hide in a corner and pretend like this isn't happening or is going to happen.
Because I think this, again, it's throughout beyond dental too, as people are starting to figure, what am I worth as a worker? Because almost every industry has lost a substantial set of workers. And so our job, or our takeaway, I think, from this podcast, besides me just venting and making fun of these people, like, who says I know my worth? Like, good grief. But so that was part one of my intention of going through this podcast, is commiserating with anybody else who has heard this ridiculous phrase and mindset. Like, anyway, but the other one is, okay, then it's coming. If it hasn't come already, or if it's only come once, it's probably going to come again. And so have I done my due diligence to ask you, what is the going rate? Because that seems to be fluctuating, just like the housing market. And then what would happen if this person did walk and go to Amazon and go to the corporation down the street?
Yeah.
What does that mean for me? Can I take the hit if it did? So I think that the key lesson from here is being prepared.
Be prepared.
And really be honest about what their worth is. Because, again, I think our inclination is going to be like, they're not worth that. Nobody's worth that. They might be. They might be. Are you sure about that?
Yeah.
So it's both. It's like trying to educate them and school them on, sweetheart, you are not worth that.
Exactly.
But really talking to yourself as well.
Yes.
And going, maybe they are worth that.
Yeah. And again, it comes back to, what's the impact to my practice if that person is gone from it? And again, it goes back to that same thing we said before. They're gone, and assume that nobody replaces them. Now, what kind of hit is that going to be on your practice? And what do you need to do to keep that person on your team if that hit's going to be substantial? That's just basic math. We've got to understand their impact, and that helps determine their worth.
Thanks for joining the conversation today. We hope that you are comforted in knowing that you are not alone, but we also hope that you're walking away with some really great tips and tricks to try in your practice. We value your feedback, so please take a few moments to rate and review the podcast. Finally, We want to make sure that we're covering the topics that matter to you. So track us down on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and let us know what topics you want us to cover. As always, please know that we are rooting for you today as you manage your dental drama.